Hey everyone, this has got to be the most well written book. This woman is so consistent in her quality of writing. It is so well written. It's just as well written as the first book. She is so consistent with her writing, her in depth, her characters are solid. They've got depth to them and layers to them. They are so good. Is it in here? This is the second book in the Rosalind Thorne mystery series. The first one was A Useful Woman. This is A Purely Private Matter by DARCIE WILDE. And welcome to the D. Louise book series. I'm Christina, Kristina. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I just read books and talk about books. I have no special effects. I have horrible lighting and horrible audio, but I need you to like and subscribe my videos because you are all I have. I have a very, very small circle of friends and family, very, very massively small. So I need your public approval, thumbs up, like and subscribe, and let me know I'm doing a good job. I need your support here. Please, please give it. So, Rosalind has been hired by Mrs. Percival Devi to get her brooch back from a blackmailer. And Margaret, alright, so wait a minute. So she goes to she's successful. She pays one of the doormen to let her into this fancy party. She gets the brooch back. She discovers some letters. Letters. Margaret Seymour has, Alice brings this girl, this woman, this married woman. Alice and George are Rosalind's best friends. Rosalind is a sort of society lady. She's on the borderline there. She could be society still. She could be a duchess. And I want her to be a duchess. I really want her to be a duchess because if she was a duchess, then she would have the power and influence to help people as she's doing now in a powerful way, in an influential way. She could do stuff. She could get places. She could see things. But my feeling is that she might end up with Harkness, the Bow Street runner, and I'd rather her not. He's a really good friend and all, and he's been really good in helping her solve the cases, but I would prefer her with Devon, but we don't know yet. So anyways, this Alice is a newspaper. Her and her brother are friends of Rosalind's, and they're newspaper reporters. And Allison brings this lady to see Rosalind, and she brings Margaret Seymour. Apparently, her husband is going to file a suit for criminal conversation against Fletcher Cavendish. Fletcher Cavendish is an actor on the stage, and apparently, her husband has been receiving letters from an anonymous source stating that Margaret and Fletcher are having an affair. So, let's see, I did this. So, chapter 3 is told from Margaret's point of view, and she goes to Fletcher she wants Fletcher to pay her husband off. Her husband wants, the notes say they want 10 grand. So Margaret goes and tells Fletcher to pay her husband the 10 grand because her husband needs the money. And then later on, someone else a more powerful person wants to give Fletcher the money to give to her husband so that the person doesn't know that they got it from person C, that he just thinks he got it from person B. It's a little layered there. And Rosalind has a really good friend in the librarian, and he'll come in handy later. Mrs. Buckland tells Rosalind that Captain Seymour is demanding a new position, that his wealth is dissipating, and it's not supporting him. And the Marquis of Wayland, Lord Adolphus, is the older sibling, something like that, and he's got the title right now. So if William and Margaret don't produce an heir, then the money will go to cousin Bertram, and Bertram really wants the money too. Everybody wants the money. And then they get they receive the letters from Cavendish. Then they go see Mr. Harkness, the Bow Street guy. They also run into Devon Winterbourne, the 8th Duke of Castleman. And I want, like I said previously, I would like Rosalind to end up with Devon for the influence, and his cousin, Louisa and her caretakers. Everybody wants Rosalind and Devon to get together, but Rosalind has been hanging out with the Bow Street runner a lot. So she goes to the theater with Devon, but she can't stay because she has a dinner meeting with Cavendish. So she has a dinner meeting with Cavendish, and she takes her maid, and Alice goes with her. So they're all having dinner at the hotel in Cavendish's private suite, and he's the actor. When Captain William Seymour shows up, drunk and obnoxious, and demanding that Cavendish leave his wife alone, that she belongs to him and not to Cavendish. And Cavendish just blows him up. He says, it's all ruined, there is nothing left, and it's all Cavendish's fault. That's what William said. Then it's revealed that that they're having money problems, and he wants Cavendish to pay him off. But if he does, then Margaret gets put on the street as guilty of being in collusion with Fletcher, or having the affair with Fletcher. So Rosalind asks Alice to see how many lady friends Cavendish has to investigate. Mrs. Kendricks, Rosalind's maid, or companion, or whatever you want to call her, also pressures Rosalind to possibly take up with Devon so she could be a duchess. And if she doesn't, Mrs. Kendrick might leave. And Mrs. Kendrick is a valuable employee, and I would rather her not leave, but she wants Rosalind to hang out with Devon and not Harkness. Later that night, after the dinner meal, Cavendish is murdered, and Mrs. Seymour sends for Rosalind. The captain is missing, and she's upset about Fletcher, and Rosalind asks her to tell her what happened last night. So then, and she lies. She tells the truth, and then later on, the captain's brother comes to supper with Sir Bertram, and after the men retired, the captain got drunk. They were scheduled to go out after dinner, so she went. Margaret went alone out to the dinner, and her husband did not, and she was supposed to meet Fletcher afterwards, after the dinner, to discuss some stuff. And her husband never came home till very late. And they questioned the maid, and the maid said that the captain went out at 10 o'clock. And when Margaret is when Rosalind is questioning Margaret, Rosalind notices there's blood on the bottom of Margaret's dress. So but her story is that when she went to the theater and she contacted Mr. Albrecht to let her in, that they discovered the body together, and she went over to see if she could help him when he had this really fancy knife sticking out of his cheek, and that's how she got the blood on the dress, supposedly. So then Edmund Kean, the actor, accuses Fletcher of sleeping with many wives. The captain had arrived home drunk, and they tell him about Cavendish's death, and he says he went to his club, which is also a lie, but you don't find out till much, much later. He says he could not have hurt Margaret, and I never gave a damn about what Bertram wanted. All I wanted was for you to stop to be mine again. So apparently Bertram, who wants the money, like everybody else does, was trying to encourage William for the divorce. Although supposedly, and there's never really any proof of this, supposedly Margaret's with child, but there's never really any conversation in regards to this. So Mrs. Seymour sends a note to Harkness's boss, John Townsend, to come to her house so she can confess. And so they send one note to Townsend and they send one note to Harkness, and they show up together. And then Rosalind tells Mrs. Kendrick to take a note to Alice, and she sends the two notes to the Bow Street guys. Rosalind was looking for Lord Bertram's address on his, supposedly pretending to look for his address on the desk because she wanted to get his handwriting sample. She wanted to see if there was a letter from him. So she takes one of those letters, and she finds the letter from Bertram to Captain listing the accusations against the wife. And then Harkness meets with Sir David and his boss Townsend, who shows up, and they receive the note from Mrs. Seymour. So then they all go over to the townhouse, and Mrs. Seymour spins a sorrowful tale of woe is me. She says that Fletcher committed suicide because she rejected his love attention. And Rosalind is just fuming, absolutely fuming, that this woman is spinning this really false tale. So, you know, she was so full. I wrote that she was so full of blarney. I've been reading a lot of Irish and stuff. I mean, and she could act. I mean, she just put on a performance for Bow Street. And she tries to imply that Fletcher committed suicide. And everybody thinks that she was covering for her husband. And Rosalind is fuming mad. She also says that Mr. Townsend warned her away from Rosalind. He told her Rosalind has been involved in unsavory business, and that their association might leave a blemish on her reputation by associating with Rosalind. Like I'm saying, if Rosalind marries Devon, then that won't be a problem anymore. She'll be this high society lady, and that will not be a problem. They won't be able to say nothing. If she marries Harkness, on the other hand, screw it. She's screwed. They're going to kill her. And it would break Devon's heart. Although Harkness has definite feelings in that area, too. So I was so mad at Margaret, who asked for Rosalind's help and just threw her under the bus. So Rosalind was like, okay, goodbye, so long, see ya. Instead, Margaret turns around and says she needs Rosalind's help more than ever. Like, what the F? What's up with this? So now she has gone on record covering up for her husband, who will protect the finger from being pointed at Margaret. Captain Seymour repeats his story to the Bow Street runner Townsend and Harkness. He says that his wife rejected Cavendish's advances. Then he says she is waiting, using you, Mr. John Townsend, just like she's using me, and you don't do well. Remember that. Then Captain Harkness says, from what you told us, your wife had a wide range of acquaintances. Why did you suspect a liaison with Mr. Cavendish above all others? George Littlefield goes to visit Adam Hawkins later in the day, and fills Adam in on that Captain Seymour was filing against Cavendish for criminal conversation, and then tells him about the affair situation. Then Rosalind tells Alice what Mrs. Seymour told the Bow Street runners, and Alice feels betrayed, like we all should, that she was using Alice in this whole situation. Alice feels the whole point of the suit was to have her child declared a bastard so Bertram could inherit the title. And like I said previously, Bertram wants the money. So Alice and Rosalind discuss trying to find Margaret's real mother to prove her lineage. Because Margaret keeps telling everybody that she was adopted and she was an orphan and all this kind of stuff, which is not true and is later divulged in the book. Harkness comes to visit. We learn that he lives with his mom, his widowed sister, 2 kids, and 3 brothers. So, again, I still want her to be with Devon because she would have the authority to do all this investigation and no one would be able to say anything to her because she would be a duchess. So then they have Rosalind gets invited to dinner at the Bertrams. Mrs. Cecil Seymour, sister-in-law to the captain, and the family, did I get this right? So, the captain had gone to see the attorney, Mr. H. Close Esquire, about the whole Cavendish issue. And Joanna Bertram, when seeing Margaret enter her house, launches into a tirade of "What have you done, Margaret?" Then she tells Joanna that false tale that she told the Bow Street runners. So then Virginia Seymour arrives and a whole lot of miscommunication about the meal goes on. Then they say that Lord Adolphus, youngest brother of Marquis of Wayland, is also coming to luncheon. Though Lord Adolphus arrives for the meal, and it isn't until after the meal is done that Lord Bertram and William Seymour come home after visiting the attorney. And it's just like, you're just like, oh, good grief, let it go already. I wanted to say that Virginia, all through the meal and all through the conversations, Virginia's like, oh, and she's having all these exclamations. And I just wanted to say, stifle it, kill all the dramatics. I was just like so over it by that point. I was just so massively, massively over it by that point. So then Virginia spills the tea that is mother only married a brewer while her sister married a marquis, that the dowager produced 2 sons William might produce, and Bertram has none, and all the money is gone. Mr. Isaac tells Mr. Harkness that the knife that killed Cavendish is a genuine Italian stiletto from Florence, a Renaissance period. While going through Cavendish's room, Mr. Fletcher of Inner Temple arrives and says he is Fletcher's attorney. Oh, hello. My co-host has arrived. Just a minute. So then Rosalind receives a summons to be at the coroner's inquest to be held at the Bow Street police office. Then she has a meeting with Devon. He wants her to come to dinner. He's trying very hard to court her. And I'm telling you, it's driving me bonkers. I really want her to go with Devon. I don't want her to go with Hawkins. I really don't. So she agrees to the dinner. We don't get to the dinner, though. We don't see that. We do see them go for a stroll, though, with Louisa, and that's later on. Harkness meets with the manager, and the manager tells him that no money was stolen from the theater. So the motive for killing Fletcher was not money. He also meets with Mrs. Frederick West and Keene, one of the fellow actors, and she says she saw Keene, and Keene says that it was not him. Then it suggested that someone broke into his dressing room and stole his clothing, and he's like, yes, he has clothing missing. He thought it went to the laundry, but apparently it was stolen. So then Mr. Harkins believes that because of the Keene issue and the clothing issue, that Harkins's murder was pre-planned. And Mrs. West and Keene tell Harkness that Cavendish was very heavily into gambling, and he had a box of trinkets that he used to buy and sell to support his gambling habits. Um, Mrs. Mrs. West makes a point that Mrs. Seymour, Margaret, or Margaretta as it's called, spends all her time trying to cover up some things no one is looking for, and she gets very afraid when someone might just be examining her too closely. Rosalind goes back to the librarian and asks if he knows of a handwriting expert, and he tells her about Elizabeth Onslow. Then Rosalind meets with Lady Wyland, the Adolphus's mother, and then she meets Darius Wayland, who seems to be like an invalid or something. I'm really not sure what was going on there. And Harkness meets with Rosalind later in the day, and she fills him in. Then Rosalind goes to dinner with the Admiral, Mrs. Broadhurst, and Lord Adolphus and Penelope Vaughan, who is supposedly an innocent fiance, who turns out to be a little on the wicked side. Spoiler alert, you didn't see it coming. You don't see it coming. It's a very twisty at the ending. And Lord Adolphus pays Rosalind $100 to stay away from his mother, supposedly. Then Rosalind, at the inquest, returns the money that Lord Adolphus gave her the day before. He gave her £100. And they have this big whole trial, and they do all this testimony, and William Seymour, the captain, Margaret's husband, testifies that he was so drunk that he doesn't remember anything from the night before. And then they ask Margaret under oath about her saying Cavendish killed himself, and she says yes. And then people in the courtroom say she's lying. And then they have Edwin Keene, the actor, and Mrs. West are called. And then George says to Alice and explains it sounds like they're setting up the captain to be framed for murder, and that's exactly what happens. He's Lord Grievous, Lord Adolphus, the guy we met before, the one who supposedly got all the money right now, and whose mother, who paid Rosalind to stay away from his mother, says that he went to see Cavendish to give him the money William needed, so that the money looked like it came from Cavendish but not him, so that William could have the money from Lord Adolphus, but that if Cavendish gave it to him, then it would look like it came from Cavendish, and William would never know that the money really came from Adolphus. And Adolphus said Mr. Cavendish was expecting to see Captain Seymour, and someone is throwing everybody under the bus. And William Seymour is convicted of the murder, and he says, "Well done, Margaret," that he totally believes that his wife framed him. And so I think I will leave you with that. There is a lot more. I have a lot more notes about Fletcher's funeral and his association and Rosalind's investigation and where it all leads, but you will have to read the book for it and be prepared for several twisty turns. And also, if you read the first book in this series, you know that Rosalind's father ran out of town because he had overstanding debts and couldn't handle the pressure. And when he left, he took his oldest daughter, Charlotte, with him. Well, one of the reasons when I forgot to mention earlier, sorry, I got the cat here. When Rosalind had gone to that party to get the brooch back from the guy that was blackmailing the lady, she spotted her sister in the hallway, and she kept telling herself that she was mistaken. But later on, Harkness investigates for her and discovers where her sister is staying. And her sister will reveal to her what has transpired in the last five or so years since they left. And you will have to read the book to find out the details that Charlotte tells Rosalind. So that's another thing. But it is a really, really well written book. It's very consistent writing. It's as good as the last one. I'm anxious to get on to the next one. And this is book 2 in the Rosalind Thorne mystery, A Purely Private Matter by DARCIE WILDE. It is so good and it is so intriguing, and you will not see the twisty turns coming. There's not just one murder, there's a couple of murderers, and it's based on something in the past, and you really have to read the book and follow all the characters. And I love watching the progression, and I love that the author's keeping up with the story, and it's so good. There's never a dull moment. And like I said before, I really want Rosalind to end up with Devon so that she's able to do her investigation with a little bit of power and authority. But I get the feeling that Miss Wilde here is leaning towards Harkness, and we could have another Sarah Brandt, Frank Malloy situation going on here. But I think she would be better off with the Duke, and then she would have power, but we don't know about that. But please hit the like and subscribe and let me know I'm doing a good job. You're all I got. If you stuck it out this long, please hit the like and subscribe. This is such an awesome book. I can't wait to get to the next one. You know, I'm a series person and I got to binge read a series. So please hit the like and subscribe and hit the thumbs up because you're all I got. Thank you.